All right, so you are back with part two of our vacation broadcast, and we were talking about spirituality and faith, and the lack of faith and atheism, and we had gone around already. We've already talked about a lot of great stuff. I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking, so I kind of want to let James kind of take the mic for a little bit.
Well, I did have a question for you. Like you said, you didn't know when, like the straw that broke the camel's back of atheism, but where, like in your adult life, was there like a moment where you really felt that that path truly started for you?
You know what? I've thought back to it, and I will tell you, I could tell you exactly what got me down the path to really accepting my atheism. And I mean, yes, I could go back and go back and go back and stretch it back to when I was 10, 11, 12, and asking questions that people, but really those were just precursors. They were just kind of hints that eventually I would probably move towards this. But what really happened is I was struggling with the concept, with scientific concepts, and how they conflicted with a lot of biblical accounts of things. And at the same time, I was trying to restructure my biblical understanding, taking into account that things in the Bible are intended to be myth and legend. Now, skipping over the portion in which, I kind of went into a pantheistic kind of trying to get all religions together, there was a point where I had finally accepted that evolution was the explanation for the diversity of life on this planet. And I was still a Christian. I
And
accepted it. I accepted it as the way God did it.
how
Um,
old were you approximately at that point?
Oh, I was in college at the time. I
Okay.
mean, but like I had sort of accepted it in the back of my mind and never really like struggled with it or questioned it. But this was the point at which I was really struggling and questioning it. We'll get into it some other time, specifically about the struggles I had with that. Because what led me to it is I had watched recently the show Jesus Camp.
Never heard.
Okay. I recommend it just as something to watch to realize that there are people out there. You would probably like it, but in the same way that you might like something because it is just jaw dropping to think that there are people out there. And basically, it goes over some Christian sects that really push their Christianity onto their children, and I don't want to get into it too much, but
Right.
basically, I had watched it, and so I was looking for more movies, more films, and videos of these crazy preachers and these people talking in tongues, just to laugh at them. That's all I was really looking for, and I came across this one by an atheist on YouTube, and YouTube is filled with atheists. Um, but there was an atheist on YouTube, and there was a video that a church had made or somebody had made of a fish, thinking that it could evolve into a fish with lungs and legs and everything once it got up on land. And so it jumps up on land, and obviously it's a fish, so it dies. And at the end of it, the YouTube atheist, he's clapping his hands in a slow clap, and he leans forward and he says, "That's a very interesting video. Now I wonder what your thoughts are on evolution." Because the idea is that's not evolution. It's not
Yeah.
at all. It's also known as what's called a straw man argument, which is I'm going to put on you what your argument is, regardless of whether or not it is, and then I'm going to knock it down and claim that I won. And it was that video because I thought it was hilarious. Here was this guy. He wasn't a Christian. He was an atheist, but he said something that kind of resounded with me. And so I started watching more of his videos. And in watching more of his videos, I started listening to what a lot of other atheists had to say. And then I started wondering and saying, there are some good points to this, even if, I believe that there is a God, what are my reasons for believing it? What is my best argument for it? And so I really had to examine it. And the weirdest thing, and I tell people this, the weirdest thing, because Christianity had been so ingrained into me, that I stopped believing that a God exists first before I stopped believing that Jesus was his son.
That is weird, but it's probably just the course you had to take for that journey. You know what I
It
mean?
it was indeed. It was more of a, I wouldn't say traumatic, but it was more of a significant thing for me once I accepted that Jesus was, possibly didn't exist, or if he existed, he wasn't divine in any regard, um, and that he wasn't a god, the son of a god or anything like that. That was more. Because to me, as a Christian, Jesus was really, to me, he was my God. He was the person that, I would pray to. When I would think about it, I would think about praying to Jesus. He
Right.
was the more real God character for me. God was his father, but, Jesus was the one who had died on the cross for my sins, and had done these great things for me. And God was just, his father.
Right. Right. Yeah, yeah. It's when you talk about like being in your 20s already, I think, or already in college, and finally accepting that evolution is real. That is,
It's weird, right?
I mean, from my perspective, yes.
Sure.
Like,
I mean, I went to a school in my high school. I remember our science teacher walking up in front of class before we started the evolution section and said, just so you're all aware, this is a section that I'm required to teach you by Ohio state law. I mean, that's the kind of world I grew up in.
right.
It was this is these are the explanation. I'm not telling you you have to believe it. That was the kind of teacher I had for one of my science classes, and I remember that distinctly.
And that's kind of scary.
It's incredibly scary, especially because I've done so much research on evolution and many scientific fields. I'm by no means an expert, but I know a good deal, and it's sad for me to think that I didn't have the opportunity to learn all these things when I was in high school.
Right. Right.
I mean, I remember being going to one of my friends' mothers and saying, "So was God just really bored, and so he just made all of the animals on land have the same bone structure?" Like, to me, evolution didn't make sense to me. Like, I was like, evolution isn't what happened. God's what did it. But why would he get, why do we all have, two arms, two legs type thing? Why don't birds have arms and wings as well? What was he, just bored? And this is just, he's like, whatever, it works. I'll just stick with it.
Right. And along those lines of the, you know, science being overshadowed by the mythology of a religion, I don't remember where I heard it or read it, but somebody explained that dinosaurs were put in the earth by the devil to fool us into believing that there was no God. Now, if I was a Christian, full Catholic, and I was making that same argument, and someone asked me, what were the dinosaurs? I like, for me, if I was to make that argument, I would be like, we didn't really even know as much. We didn't know a fraction of what we know about that era of the past of this planet when the Bible was written. So it was irrelevant to the people of the time. And, we already know that this is just a book of stories, to help guide us. And that seems like a valid argument from an intelligent person who is strong in their faith. That makes sense. To say that the devil put dinosaurs in the ground to fool us is just it reeks of, like, I don't know what it reeks. It sounds insane to me. It sounds like an insane argument of someone who's just trying to, you know, hold on tight and not let the ship sink or something. I don't even know. It sounds ridiculous to me. I don't know how someone could stand up in front of their congregation and make that proclamation. It baffles me.
Well, let me try to as somebody who grew up in a world in which the world was 6 to 10,000 years old. As somebody who grew up in that kind of an environment, um, the thing is that if any single thing, any single verse is in the Bible that can necessarily not be literal. That if there's an aspect of the Bible that is open to interpretation, then you run into the problem of, well, how do you determine which parts of the Bible are what you can interpret, and which parts are metaphor and which parts are meant to be literal. And so a lot of Christians, in order to prevent the problem of, well, how do I explain what can be interpreted and what can't be interpreted, they just say, well, it's all literal. And so when you have a scientific observation or a scientific theory that conflicts with an aspect of the Bible, you can easily make up a spiritual explanation for why that's the case. And the nice thing about making up any sort of spiritual explanation for anything is you don't actually have to show evidence. You just can say it's a spiritual explanation, because as of yet, there is no evidence of any kind of spiritual anything.
Right.
So, I mean, I can kind of understand how people could hold that position, only because I know how much is at stake within their mind about that faith. There's so much tied to that faith in regards to who they are as a person, that they have to come up with something, even if it conflicts with rationality, in order to hang on to that identity.
And that's where I get lost in it. And that's where I become very disconnected from, a lot of religion, or like trying to have the conversation with someone who has got that level of faith. And I have plenty of friends that are religious that I can have these conversations with, that are Christians, and do believe, but still have the conversation. Oh, that's interesting. You believe that. This is what I believe. Kind of conversations like you and I can have. Okay, folks, want to apologize if this one seems a little choppier than normal. We have had a little bit of trouble with the recording software. Hopefully we're back on track to the end here. But I was just commenting on how, there are people that you can have the conversation with that have strong beliefs and have strong faith. And there are some people that, just from my perspective, feel like, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to reference it again. Satan hid dinosaurs in the ground to fool us a billion years ago, or whatever, millions of years ago. And I don't know. I don't know if that's. I know you have experienced a little more firsthand, or than I have, that sort of sense of anything to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I mean, if faith, really, for a lot of people, especially Christians, their faith is an identifier for them. There's a group of people that they are a part of, a group of that, and so that kind of helps identify them. That's one thing that I don't have as an atheist. My being an atheist doesn't define who I am. My being a humanist, my being a socialist, those things define more about who I am than the fact that I lack the belief that a God exists. But as a Christian, with Christians, there is a bigger aspect to their definition of who they are as a person because of that. And when something that rocks their belief or even, pushes against their belief that much, they're going to develop any kind of way to kind of outthink it. And the nice thing, or to the detriment, the bad thing about the way our brains work is we can actually hold conflicting concepts in our brains at the same time and it not make us, fall apart. There was a Star Trek Voyager episode in which the holographic doctor, they had to wipe his memory because he had two different patients that both had the same possibility of survival, and he had to make a decision about which one to save. And the conflict created a cascading effects in his subroutines that made it so that even any kind of decision that he was going to make created this he couldn't even make decisions about anything because of this effect that was going on, and they had to erase portions of his memory, and then he got those memories back, and he had to kind of learn to deal with it.
And we can actually make that call.
We can, yeah, we can make that call, and I mean there are people out there who struggle with being able to make decisions, and but those people, that is due to a chemical imbalance in the brain or a different way of their brain being wired. It's an abnormal effect of their brain. Typically, our brains are very capable of holding conflicting points of view and conflicting concepts. Because that's really the way they evolved as a social species, being able to hold conflicting points of view and ideas and other perspectives is a hallmark. I mean, we have to have that.
Oh yeah, without, I mean, well, I mean, it's probably not fair to compare us because we don't know any other species that lives anywhere near comparable life to what we live in, but we live in a very convoluted and complicated world, even without putting religion in it, and being able to multitask in that way mentally is huge for us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't even know where to go with this anymore. I mean, I feel like it's unfair because we don't have that third voice here, and like I have questions for a person who's not here.
Yeah, it's
You know what I
not
mean?
unlike when we had to talk about the gun control, not having a person in favor of that to hold that position. I would be more than happy to allow anybody who wants to ever come on and hold a completely conflicting point of view. This is actually an open call to Shirley Phelps. I'll take her on our tiny little talk show at any point. I don't know if we would get very far with it, but it would definitely be interesting.
Yeah, if I don't know if it would ever make it on the air, but I would love to have a copy of that conversation.
I by all means, any member of the Westboro Baptist Church, or any person who is a tried and true creationist who believes that the world is only 6 to 10,000 years old. I'm perfectly fine with you coming on. I don't think that. I mean, we would set up. I mean, we would know from the outset that none of us are going to change each other's minds, and that's not what I think you think is about. It's
Not at
just
all.
giving you an opportunity to kind of voice your opinions, your ideas, letting us kind of talk with you about them, challenge them a little bit, and likewise letting our ideas be challenged. Nothing wrong with that. The forum of ideas is out there. Let us have this let's have this talk. Let's not get shouting past each other. That's what it's all about. If I could get really passionate about it for a moment, that's really what we're here for, is to have that conversation.
100%, 100%. And I know for sure that we're on the same page, that we do in no way correlate the Westboro Baptist, and I put it in parentheses, church, which they do not deserve that title, with people of actual faith. Because the Westboro Baptist Church is like they're something fortunately unique in the world. And there's no correlation to, a Christian or a Catholic. I don't consider them people of faith even. I mean, and that's probably going to exclude them from ever coming on our show. Oh, shucks. Um, I consider them people of hate, and that's a whole different thing, because I mean, like we talked about earlier, or that I mentioned earlier, like it seems like most major religions still in existence today, um, they do try to point people towards um, a, a more positive interaction with their fellow humans. I guess is probably one way to put it. Um, and this will actually, when gets released, we should have already had a previous podcast that we actually haven't recorded yet. But by the time the listeners, hear this, you should have already heard that one, where we talk a little bit more about the specifics of that. Um, so who knows? Because it's gonna like we're experiencing these in the reverse order. They're going to hear them. Um,
Yes, so it should be rather interesting that you will get our perspective back in January before our talk, and it's with Lane. You guys remember him? Well, we don't. It's speaking, and you will remember him from our first February podcast. But we actually haven't talked with him yet. We are looking forward to it, but you guys will remember him from a couple of weeks ago.
yes, I feel like I'm in Back to the Future all of a sudden, where
Yeah.
you know,
We're in the past talking about a future event in a past terminology.
that hasn't happened yet.
Yes. Yes. So, in the last couple of minutes, the one question that I wanted to ask you specifically, and I think it's got a pretty simple answer, is so when we die, do you think that there is something after we die?
I don't know.
well, we
I
know that. We've established
yeah,
that.
I don't. I would lean if I was like if I had to answer yes or no, I would lean towards yes.
Hmm.
No idea what that is. Couldn't tell you. Um, it could be a million different options that I could come up with, and not one of them right. And there still
What's
be something after this.
what's your favorite one? If you would design your afterlife, what would the afterlife be like? What is your ideal?
My ideal.
Yes. Not like specifically, oh well, there's Xbox in every room and
Free Starbucks
yeah.
whenever you want it.
No, like
Um,
like more general. What would the afterlife be?
as an individual person, like myself personally, I would like it to be the situation where you can spend eternity with the people that you've loved in life, the ones that have passed before you are already there, and the ones that will pass after you are going to come follow. That I like the thought of that.
Hmm.
Um, but I also feel like I think it's the Krishna and that religion being it's like you're traveling on the wheel or the levels and everything like reincarnation,
Sure.
where you're learning new lessons. As an intellectual, seems very appealing to me. That the journey would be different every time, and knowing there's another journey after this. um, but again, like when it gets right down to it, I don't know if there is anything, and I don't know, like to pick a favorite. It's or like an ideal seems very odd to me. I could tell you what my favorite local restaurant is because I've experienced local restaurants. You know, but those would be my answers either way.
I would say I don't believe that there is an afterlife, except in the sense that we live on in the memories of those who we leave behind. I live on in the DNA that I've passed on to my children, and hopefully they will then have children and pass that DNA on. And in that sense, I will live on. But I don't actually believe that I will have a consciousness that exists beyond this body. It's a little sad, but if I was hoping that I was wrong and hoping that there was an afterlife, I would hope that it would be kind of like the afterlife in the movie What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams. That was one, except for the portion in which like there's a hell. Um, that was, but at least the hell that they had designed, the people who weren't sent there by any deity. They were sent there by themselves, by who they were as a person in this life, and that not necessarily they made bad decisions and that sent them to hell, but they believed that they belonged there.
Right.
And so that's why they were there, is because that's where they believed they belong. If they had believed that they belonged elsewhere, or even while they're still there, if they believed that they belong elsewhere, not to give away too much of the movie, then they could leave hell and go into a place um, of happiness and being with their, because that incorporates their, the friends and family thing, being able to see them, having your own little world, but where you can create and do whatever you want, and at the same time being able to go and interact with others, and also being able to reincarnate oneself back into the wheel.
Right. Right.
And so that's, I always, every time I see that movie, aside from it making me bawl like a baby, um, I like that concept of the afterlife.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, as always, interesting topic. I think we rolled right through an hour. It might be a little less. It's hard to tell. We did have a lot of pick up
Technical
and start
difficulties.
again. Yeah, technical difficulties. Where you need to get that noise they do when they put up the thing.
Ding.
Yeah.
Or some kind of like elevator music with some terrible little graphic. Pictures of one of us wrapped up in electrical cords and whatever. uh, Either way, yes, by all means, it was a great conversation. We barely even scratched the surface of a lot of things, so I'm sure we will come back to these in the future. I'm sure our conversation with Lane, which will happen in the future, but when you're hearing this, will have happened in the past, will be a very interesting and fun conversation. And I hope to have more like these with you and with any other guests who come along. So
Definitely, definitely. And check us out next week for the second round of Vacation Podcast, which will be recorded before they are played, and we'll also have content that may reference things that happened before you hear it, but after we recorded it. Does that make sense? I think we should leave it off there. Leave them confused.
That sounds good. All right, guys. Thanks again. We'll see you next week.